Okay, everyone. I will open this meeting of the Representation Board, the final meeting for this term, at 5:32 p.m. on Thursday, the 14th of November. And I'll start by acknowledging, on behalf of everyone, the traditional owners of the land on which we meet on today, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and I pay respect to elders past and present. I'll acknowledge and respect the continuing culture and contribution they make to the life of this university, this city, and this region. I'll also note today that we have a few motions on the agenda, and I encourage respectful discussion on all of those. Some of these motions may be triggering, maybe not to people in this room, but people who may watch this recording, so please be mindful of that. I'll move on to number 2, attendance. Members present today, we have myself, Jasmine, Jackie, Serena, Chloe, Amari, Hannah, and online Xavier and Nini. Others present, we have Chloe, our lovely minute taker. Chloe, sorry, confusing you. Lorian, Tom, Mitch, who is just leaving, but I'm sure we'll be back. Robert and Ella. Present, we also have for Liz, who's going to be here in any second. Apologies and leave of absence. It seems to be Arafin is absent, although he should be joining, so potentially we'll seek out for him to come online soon. And who else? Yeah. Oh, okay. If they show up, I'll tell them. And also Joanne is here as others present. Hello, Joanne. Okay, I'll move on to number 3, disclosure of any potential perceived conflicts of interest. Does anyone have any conflicts of interest with this agenda at all? Any motions? No, all good. I'll move on to the minutes of the previous meeting, 4.1. I have a motion that the Representation Board approves the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 17th of the 10th, 2024, as a true and accurate record of the proceedings. Would anyone like to move that for me? Jackie, anyone like to second that? Amari, is there any discussion on this, on the minutes? Anything need to be changed? It's all good. Amari?
Just under my report for the discussion from the last lot of minutes, it simply says a lot more accessibility for staff and students. Can we maybe specify that that's accessibility of the content warning guide?
Yeah.
Because otherwise it could get a bit confusing with some of like the actual accessibility work that Liz is doing.
Yeah, I'll make note of that. Can you just email that through to me, Mitch and Marianne as well? Thank you. With that amendment, are we all good to move to a vote? Can I see hands in favour of that motion? Any against? That's carried. And we'll move up to matters arising from the minutes. Are there any matters arising from these minutes? Okay, joining us as others present, we have the incoming VP Sustainability and Welfare and President, Dylan Storer and Razan. Hello, Dylan and Razan. I'm up to matters arising from the minutes, number 5. No matters arising? All good. I'll move on to 6, public question time. Does anyone from the gallery want to partake in question time at all? No worries. Can you make sure just microphone on? Thank you for your question.
Oh, it's on, is it working? Yeah, I think I just have a question about, well, one, the progress with the, when is Curtin University going to be releasing all of its connections to weapons companies and the defence industry? Because the MOU did basically like say that Curtin has to do it by November, I'm pretty sure, and we haven't seen anything yet. So that's my first question. My second question is, I've got a question. I saw a photo of a WA Young Labor meeting, and Jasmine, you were in the photo. So I'm just curious, like, you talk a lot about being critical of the Labor Party, and the Labor Party, I think, has continued to steadfastly be, on the side of the Israeli state, but also on the side of Trump's America. Now, Albanese came out and did a really big congratulations to Donald Trump, and that he, is committed to the US alliance, and all of that comes with the US alliance. So I guess I want Jasmine Tweed to please explain why she was present in a WA Young Labor photo. Thank you.
Are you all right to answer both those questions? That second question, I will make sure to keep it relevant to your role. I don't want this to turn into a big argument that is not relevant to this role.
Yeah, and so in terms of the deadline, so me and V had a meeting recently about confirming that they will meet the deadline of November 30th, and they believe that everything will be up to date, ready to go. They're just doing a final check with the Curtin audit and legal team that all that any contracts that have come through literally over the last couple of days are added to that list, and once that's been confirmed to us, we will be sending out an email to students so they can see the full list and where it will be placed on the website and everything. And then in terms of me at a Young Labor meeting, so I was present at a meeting as an observer. I attended to actually talk about Palestine and getting young people more involved on Palestinian activism. Because I'm sure people that saw at the encampment, you had Socialist Alliance, you had the Greens, and you had other groups involved in pro-Palestine activism on campus, and there are many members of Young Labor who claim to be pro-Palestinian and to be a part of that cause, but then don't show up at initiatives. You see people, some go with their unions, you see a lot from the CFMEU and things like that, but you don't see, you don't see the UWU waving their flags, you don't see the AMWU, big unions that claim to be in the left. So I came and spoke on that as an observer of the meeting, which anyone can observe those meetings. So that's, I was there in my capacity. And also when it came to the photo that they took with the Kalamunda candidate or something, you got it on mute. In terms of leaving the room for that photo, I couldn't even get to the front to leave the door, so I was just in the photo. But if that's my question answered. If there's any other questions.
Okay, thank you, Jasmine.
I'm not a member of the Labor Party right now.
I'll keep it relevant. Anyone else with a question for question time? Okay, moving on. Go for items not for discussion. Is there anything on this agenda that needs to be started off for discussion? No, moving on. I'll go to reports. 8.1 should be 8.1 on the agenda, not 4.1. President, your report is submitted as well as your KPIs. Anything to comment or add to those?
I'm happy to take it as tabled, but free to answer any questions.
Is there any questions for Jasmine? Okay, move on to Vice President Education. That's my report. I'll take it as submitted. Are there any questions for that report? I'm seeing none. Moving on to Vice President Sustainability and Welfare. Jackie, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I'm happy to take it as table, but also happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Jackie? Seeing none, I'll move on to FBL Representative Hannah. Yours was submitted with your KPIs. Anything to add?
Nothing to add, but happy to answer any questions.
Good. Any questions for Hannah? Seeing none, I'll move on to Science and Engineering Representative Thane, who I just realised is not here and is supposed to be joining online, so is currently absent. If Thane joins in the next few minutes, hopefully maybe we can ask them. If Thane doesn't join, are there any questions for Thane's report or KPIs? No, moving on. I'll go to Health Sciences. Nina, your report was submitted. Would you like to add anything to that?
Nothing else to add, but happy to answer questions.
Any questions for Nini's report or KPIs? Seeing none, I'll move on to Faculty of Humanities. Amara, your report and KPIs were submitted. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just a couple of things. So, as I mentioned in the report, for content warnings, LITEC have now committed to being the ones to take it and drive it going forward and support it rolling out across all faculties. I wasn't able to include it in my report because the details weren't finalised until a bit after I submitted this report. But in terms of the School of Education, we currently have a survey out to all of our School of Education students, basically asking sort of how they're going, any issues they've had with their placements and the like in the past year or so. We've had a lot of very concerning reports coming back from them. You know, they have been the most, if not the majority of students actually reaching out to me in my role as humanities job asking for help and assistance. So we're just having a bit of a closer look at what's actually going on. Obviously, this is something that will be ongoing into next year, but we have the report out now. We've already got a good number of responses starting to come in, and they are showing, we're kind of matching a lot of what we've been hearing before this. So it's concerning, but it is also good that we are actually now getting that evidence so we can do something about it. Other than that, though, the rest of my report I'll take as written, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll note as well that Project the ETU is also sending out a survey to staff members in the School of Education as well currently, and we'll probably go and report to each other, not like the results anonymized, but just kind of check in to see if there's any overlap in issues. Any questions for Amari in that one? Seeing none, I'll move on to Student Assist. Joanne, your report was submitted. Do you want to add anything to that report? Thank you for it, as always.
No, nothing further to add.
All good. Any questions for that one? All good. I'll move on to ISC President Serena. Yours was submitted with your KPIs. Anything to add?
Maybe just that my handover, I've completed it this morning to the incoming ISC rep, and also tomorrow night is Pasar Malam, so I encourage you guys, if you are free, just come along and enjoy. You guys deserve to treat yourselves for work touch this semester, this year.
Thank you, Serena. And amazing work in all the social media from the summer one. Loving it. Any questions for the ISC President? Seeing none, I'll move on to PSC President Arifin, who's still absent, but are there any questions for that report on notice at all? Seeing none, I'll move on to Queer Officer Xavier. Your report and KPIs were submitted. Do you want to add anything to that?
Hopefully if they can hear me, nothing to add, but happy to answer any questions.
Good. Any questions for Xavier? Seeing none, I'll move on to Women's Officer. Chloe, your report was submitted. And your KPIs, anything to add to that?
No, I'll take it as table. If there's any questions for you guys.
Any questions for Chloe? Seeing none, I'll move on to the Accessibility Officer. For Liz, your report and KPIs were submitted. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, it says table, but happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Liz? All good. Moving on to Higher Education Developments. That one was submitted by Marianne. Are there any questions or discussion on that one? Yeah, seeing none, I'll move on to the motion that the Representation Board notes the reports. Can I have a mover for that one? Jackie, and can I seconder? Can I do Hannah? You put your hand up. Yep. Any hands in favour of that motion? Any against? That motion is carried. And now we'll also move to the motion that the Representation Board. I just want to clarify: is it approve or just note the KPIs? It says approve. Yep. Okay, just double checking. Okay, so that the Representation Board approves the submitted final key performance indicator reviews. Can I have a mover for that one? Amari, and a seconder. Flo. Can I see hands in favour of that one? Any against? Don't see any. That is carried. All right. Items for discussion and resolution. So I probably should have noted at the start, our first motion is the one submitted by myself, Student Financial Inclusion Tracker. I'm going to take this one off as a motion and just include it as an item for discussion, as currently we need to get some more information about privacy concerning this survey and how it's being developed. And then once we've got that, it can kind of go as a motion. So this is just sort of an item for discussion. If you had any questions or basically thoughts about this motion, can you please let me know? But we won't move it or anything. Oh, yeah, okay. Essentially, so the NUS just recently endorsed sort of a co-partnership initiative where they want to do a student finances survey. The government used to do this about finding out the welfare and kind of financial level of how students are going. They don't do that anymore. Sorry, not the government. University of Australia used to do this. They don't do it anymore. So now this is an initiative created by, it's called Maven and Edge Consulting. The people who are founders of that organisation have been strong advocates for university students in the welfare space. They've collaborated with the NUS to try and create this survey, which will include qualitative data and testimonials from students struggling currently, as well as more quantitative data from students as part of a big survey they're developing with the NUS. They're looking to collaborate with sort of organisations like the Curtin Student Guild to make sure students are getting basically all the data they can to help put into this survey. So it's a big project so that basically we can use it, all student unions and NGOs can use it in campaigns to do with welfare and education. So that's generally the gist of it. Are there any questions? Does anyone want to add anything to that? I'm assuming it's not really contentious if it came back for motion. Anyone has any concerns?
If it comes back, if it comes back that in terms of the collection of data and everything is compliant with the guild standards with privacy, then it will come back to the next reps board for approval. But yeah, again, when it comes to the strength of campaigns and things like that, having data and numbers and testimonials can be extremely powerful within a campaign. So it is essential that this data is continued to be collected, even if Universities Australia won't fund it anymore.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jasmine. Any final questions, remarks? We're all good with that? All right, cool. What's going on here? Nothing online? Okay. I'll move on then to motion 9.2, protest for deaths in custody. This one was submitted by Ella Gionda and it's moved by Xavier, seconded by Jackie Buchanan. The motion is that the Representation Board A condemns the Labor WA government for their overseeing of the racist police and prison system. B, hold the WA Labor government responsible for the deaths of 10 people in WA incarceration this year alone. And C, publicly endorse and promote the rally against WA prison system on 27th of November. Xavier, as the mover of this motion, did you want to speak to it at all?
Yeah, sorry, it's not the best to try and do this online, but I did want to move some of the motions anyway. So I've been in Meanjin in the past few days for a conference, and I feel like what's been really on my mind at the minute is the fact that the Australian government believes that 15 and 16-year-olds aren't mature enough to use social media, but that children as young as 10 belong in prisons. So I think that's kind of what I'm thinking about when I'm reading this motion. The number of Indigenous children in the prison system is abhorrent, and beyond that, the number of Indigenous children who've died in custody is unthinkable. And Cleveland Dodd, as mentioned in the motion, is one of the many children who's lost their life due to this systemic injustice. So I think this kind of political advocacy is central to our work as student unionists, and we need to commit to educating our fellow students on these issues through our social media channels, to have a presence at protests, and I suppose keeping trauma-informed practice in our hearts with this, and in terms of the guilds, making sure that students who are engaging in these kinds of conversations have access to good quality wellbeing and mental health support, because we know, particularly as a social work student, vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue around this work is a big thing. But yes, definitely recommend everyone support the motion.
Thank you, Xavier. And Jackie as seconder, do you want to add anything?
No, I completely agree with the sentiment of this motion, so I'm happy to waive.
And Ella, you submitted this motion. Do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty horrific, the state of the WA prison kind of complex. It's not just kids, like in Hakea prison, 10 people have died in custody this year, many of them Aboriginal. And then, yeah, like Cleveland Dodd last year, and another young boy died in Banksia Hill this year as well. And also a few weeks ago, someone died in Casuarina prison. So like this is an epidemic in WA prisons, and I think really highlights the intense racism at the heart of this country, the intense poverty that Aboriginal people continue to be in, and the fact that they are targeted quite viciously by the police all the time. They are not given, adequate social services, public housing, basic resources to live lives free from oppression. And yeah, the poverty keeps them in oppression. And there's, a long hangover of the legacy of the, colonization, the stolen generations, all of this stuff that continues to keep Aboriginal people extremely oppressed and, just at the bottom of society. And the Australian government and the Labor Party basically does every single thing in its power to keep Aboriginal people at the bottom, marginalised, and to attack their rights, and to police their communities, and to continuously steal their land, and all sorts of things like that. And so I think, this is a Labor Party. The Labor state governments all around the country have poured more money into prisons over the past few years. They've actually refused to raise the age of criminal responsibility for many, many years. And they in Queensland, the whole election was run on a campaign of law and order, where each party was trying to compete as to how tough they were on youth crime, essentially. And the mainstream media has been creating these exaggerated stories of youth crime, Indigenous kids being dangerous, et cetera, to justify more police on the streets, which is only entrenching the oppression that Aboriginal people face. So I think this is a really serious issue, and I think, especially in Western Australia, and I think it's also just a massive fucking shame on the Australian Labor Party for continuing to be at the heart of the detention that and the oppression that Aboriginal people face in this country. And as Xavier said, kids should not be in prison, but also nobody should be in prison really. When it's mostly poor people and the most oppressed who get targeted by the police every single day. So I think it's extremely important the Guild promotes this protest, but also I think it's important the Guild takes up political positions of being opposed to the Labor government and everything it does to keep the youth detention system in place.
Is there any further questions or discussion on this motion at all? Mine?
Yeah, I just want to add, obviously 100% back, like Jackie said, the sentiment of this and agree with everything in it. I do want to say that when it comes to us endorsing and promoting our rallies in this and just, platforming and advocating for, the reform of these issues, I think it's very important that we do, at a minimum, consult with Indigenous people to make sure that when we are promoting these things, we're doing it in a way that is culturally safe. To me, excluding, the idea of content warnings and all that sort of stuff, and, practicing what we're preaching to the university, I think it is very important that when we are advocating for the reform of these things and advocating for lesser harm to these communities, that we are not also causing harm to these communities in the way that we're getting that message out. So I just want to make sure that when we are putting these comms out and when we are talking about these things, that we're doing it in a way that is culturally safe.
Yeah, thank you, Amari. And Xavier's commented as well. I agree. It's important to know. Any other discussion or questions for this motion at all? Okay, then I'll take it to a vote. Can I see hands in favour of this motion? Any against? Seeing none, that is carried. And I'll move on to motion 9.3, visas for Palestinian refugees. And the motion is that the Representation Board A condemns the ALP, and that is Australian Labor Party for clarification. A condemns the ALP for its refusal to grant humanitarian visas to most Palestinian refugees. B condemns the ALP for its refusal to grant permanent residency for Palestinian refugees. C condemns the ALP for the racist, unjust screening processes its government has applied to Palestinian refugees and for asserting that they may pose a terror threat to Australia. D condemns the ALP for allowing Australian citizens to travel to Israel to serve in the IDF and return home freely and without consequence. And E endorses and publicly supports the next pro-Palestine protest called by Friends of Palestine WA. This one's moved by Serena, seconded by Xavier, and submitted by Robert Vusak. Robert, as submitted, actually, I think you should go first. Sorry, I wasn't going to speak first on that one. That makes sense.
I think this is an incredibly important motion. For many months now, basically the Australian government has totally refused to allow Palestinians into the country. Palestinians who, of course, are fleeing the genocide, the total destruction of their country and life in Gaza and the West Bank as well. I think obviously this is a total disgrace that these people fleeing war and genocide should be allowed into this country at the bare minimum. They're kind of subject to all kinds of ridiculous kind of screening processes. There's like a right-wing kind of media campaign promoted by both sides of politics, including the Labor Party, who kind of suggests that they might pose a terror threat to Australia, which is a kind of ridiculous assertion, which is just repeating Israeli kind of myths, which have just been used to justify genocide. The Australian government should, at the very least, kind of apply the same standard to Palestinian refugees that they applied to Ukrainian refugees 2 years ago, when they allowed basically anyone into the country with no restrictions whatsoever on permanent kind of visas. They're totally refusing to do that. So I think this really kind of shows, as the last motion mentioned as well, the total kind of hypocrisy of the Labor Party, who can kind of claim to be against things like racism and supposedly against what's going on in Gaza, when they kind of uphold the kind of Israeli government's narratives and refuse Palestinians to safety in this country. Yes, it's incredibly important that we kind of point to the Australian Labor Party as totally responsible for this, and point to the Australian Labor Party as complicit in the genocidal kind of process happening in Palestine. We need to be extremely clear about the fact that it is the Labor Party that is doing this, that the Labor Party, which is in government, is kind of upholding this kind of system. So we need to kind of clearly kind of state that. And so far the Guild has kind of, done a lot of stuff for the Palestine movement, but has kind of refused to kind of clearly state that the Labor Party is complicit and upholds the genocide in Gaza. And also the other part of the motion is the protest movement that actually over the last few months, the Guild has been quite inconsistent with its kind of promotion of Palestine protests. There have been a number of protests for Palestine that haven't been promoted actively by the Guild. Just last weekend, there was a major kind of protest for Palestine in the city, but there wasn't any promotion for it that I saw on any kind of Guild social media. At the very least, really the Guild should be kind of going out there on the streets and talking to people about these protests, right? The Guild claims to be pro-Palestine activists, yet I've never seen them kind of go out into the streets and kind of leaflet people kind of promoting these protests. Is something that I've done, something that I do every day, something I was doing just a few hours ago, and yet the Guild kind of doesn't do that. And the Guild has far more resources than any individual student like myself. So I just think it's incredibly important that the Guild kind of commits to actively promoting all of these protests that are called by Friends of Palestine, and kind of puts as much kind of promotion and enthusiasm into promoting these that they do kind of other kind of social apolitical events that the Guild organises.
Thank you, Rob. So the mover of this motion is Serena. So Serena, would you like to speak to this one at all?
Yep. So I do support this motion. The temporary humanitarian stay visa, basically it offers refugees with a 3-year stay visa, including access to Medicare, working and study rights. Without this humanitarian visa, refugees who are in Australia, basically they are left to fend for themselves. They have to rely on family, relatives. So not much that they can do, even if they are here in Australia. I do think that it is important to give the refugees these rights. And there has been a lot of refusals for these humanitarian visas. If the refugees actually are granted humanitarian visas, they actually can be considered to get permanent residency visas. So this was like you mentioned, this was applied in the past for Ukrainian refugees. So I'm not sure why Palestinian refugees are getting their visas rejected. This shows some discrimination towards Palestinians, I believe. And since the Guild has been vocal about their pro-Palestinian stance throughout the semester and throughout the year, this is another opportunity for the Guild to show that they are actively doing showing support to Palestinians by endorsing the protest as well.
Thank you, Serena. Rizan, you had your hand up. Did you want to ask a question at all, or is it all good?
It's all good. I was Serena. I second what Serena said. I was gonna say something similar, but it's all good.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions or discussion on this motion at all? No? Okay, I'll take that one to a vote. Can I see hands in favour of that one? Oh, so sorry, Xavier. I completely forgot about seconder. No voting yet. Xavier, as a seconder, would you like to speak on this motion?
Thank you. Sorry, I was like, I don't know how to politely.
No, that was my fault.
Please. Yeah, I mean, I think Rob summarized really well all of my complicated feelings about the visa system. And very, very supportive of this motion. I think picking out the discrepancy between how Ukrainians and Afghans have been treated in recent years with the offering of visas versus Palestinians, thinking that in 2022, 11,000 visas were offered to Ukrainians. In 2021, more than 15,000 were offered to Afghans. So in contrast, thinking only a dozen have been offered to Palestinians, it's hard to conceive that as anything except deliberate cruelty towards Palestinians. And I particularly think in terms of Australia and AUKUS's allegiance to Israel in general, particularly looking at the difference between Israeli visas in general versus Palestinian visas, only 41% of Palestinian visas were accepted versus 98% of Israeli visa applications. So really in that context, yeah, it's hard to see anything but deliberate cruelty and discrimination by the Israeli government. So just want to reaffirm that highly support.
Thank you, Xavier. Sorry about that. Any other questions? Any other discussion? Okay, I'll move that to a vote. All in favour of motion 9.3? And any against? Seeing none, that motion is carried. We'll go on to our final motion, 9.4, condemn increased military spending. This motion was submitted by Hamida Kosa, moved by Jackie Buchanan. I'll read out the motion that the Representation Board condemns the Albanese government's recent announcement of its increases into military spending through the GWEO, which is the Australian Guided Weapons and Explosive Ordnance plans. Just on this plan, ALP will be spending $21 billion over the next decade. B, Albanese government's drive to militarism and war and its significant increases to military funding in a national defence strategy report announced in April, the government is expected to be spending $765 billion over the next 10 years. This one's moved by Jackie. Can I get a seconder for that one? Chloe? Oh, good. Jackie, do you want to speak to this motion at all?
Similar to the last one, I completely agree with the sentiment of this motion, and it's already covered in the background, but I think it is despicable that this amount of money is going directly into the military budget when we're in the middle of the cost of living crisis. We've got students who have to choose between paying for petrol and food right now, and the amount of money that's being poured into the military is enraging. But I'm happy to waive if either Rob or Ella wanted to speak, because I know Hamdi's not here.
Yeah, I'll speak to this. Yeah, I mean, I agree. Certainly, the military spending is ridiculous. You know, like the Labor government promised to spend over $300 billion over the next decade or so, and recently they've kind of proposed like a kind of addition to that, kind of promise to spend even more money now. It's pretty ridiculous. I don't think any money should really be going to militarism and war. I think the cost of living crisis makes this an even greater issue for us to kind of deal with today, you know, given just like that how blatant the kind of discrepancy is between kind of funding for basic services and funding for the military and war. But I think also, you know, as you know, activists who've been active in the Palestine movement, we should also kind of realize that this is a major step towards like a greater kind of conflict potentially with Australia's kind of rivals. And I think we should be opposed to war in all of its forms. We should be opposed to this increase in military spending, because we should be against all war and the Australian government's kind of ridiculous assertions that this is somehow being used for national defence, when in reality Australia has a long history of being incredibly aggressive and joining so many kind of imperialist wars that have just done nothing but wreak havoc and kill millions of people around the world. So I think we should be against this, because we should be active in an anti-war, anti-militarist, anti-imperialist campaign. I'd like to see the Guild kind of be more involved and more active in promoting protests of all sorts against war and imperialism, and the Palestine movement is one important part of that. But I think the Guild should be looking to be more active in protests against war and military spending in general. And certainly, as this kind of increase in military spending just kind of continues to go up, as I'm sure it will over the kind of following years, and as tensions around the world kind of continue to increase, I think the Guild should stand firmly on the side of being against all of that and being against the drive to war that so many kind of Western ruling classes clearly are kind of pushing towards.
Thank you, Rob. I'll note as well, Arifin has joined us. Thank you, Arifin. Chloe, you're seconder of this motion. Would you like to add anything to that?
Sorry, just a little detail of just displacement of money for something that just blows my mind when we have a lot of people struggling, a lot of discrimination all around, funding for a lot of things that are needed, not for military. So yeah, it's just despicable, and we should definitely notice this.
Thank you, Chloe. Are there any more questions or discussion on this motion at all? Seeing none, then I'll take it to a vote. All hands in favour of motion 9.4. Are there any against? Seeing none, that motion is carried. And now we're on to general business. Are there any items for general business? I think Jasmine, go ahead.
So I just wanted to acknowledge this is our last representation board of the 55th Guild Council, and I want to take the time to thank you all on all the work and all the wins you've achieved for students throughout your terms, this year and previous terms. Being your president and being a part of this team is, one of the best things I've had the opportunity to do, and I really appreciate the work that every single one of you have put into your terms, and seeing everyone grow and develop and come into their roles, and be the passionate leaders that you are in your handover process that I'm seeing right now. So I just wanted to take the time to thank everyone for that. My last reps board as president, and my saying farewell to the Guild. So yeah, I wanted to just take the time to thank everyone for that.
Thank you, Jasmine. I echo the sentiments as well. I really commend all of you for your very professional handovers you're doing this year. I'm really actually blown away by how well you are all handling it very professionally and autonomously as well. Was there anything else for general business? Okay, I'll move on to the meeting evaluation, which is being done by Serena today. Serena, did you want to give us any notes about the meeting?
I think we finished in like a record timing, so that's the strength of this meeting. Also, I like that we had a very civilized discussion, and I liked the chair's tone when she read through the agenda in a very sing-song voice. That was really nice. And I believe values that were shown, integrity was shown, reps held themselves accountable by submitting the KPIs with the reports. We also stand for equity, equality, and fairness with a diverse group of people. So diversity was shown as we discussed broader issues facing local community, and also we passed motion standing up for oppressed groups of people such as the Indigenous Aboriginal Australians as well as the Palestinians.
Thank you, Serena. So item 12 is next meeting. This is the final meeting of the representation board for the 55th Guild Council. And so the first meeting of the representation board of the 56th Guild Council will be held on Monday, the 2nd of December, 2024. I'll close this meeting at 6:11 p.m. the 14th of November, 2024. Thank you, everyone. Leave. Bye-bye. Thank you for